Look at your smash the way you give on the when seal gedu. Lu will actually go to will hide go. I had some get on the will algira da awesome go will alone. Got any time to will jabba nixuga de gua. Lu am gogoro, ada ajik sigoro, to will silla haklaus and that school. Will exigoro, the will ni goa, then will well at Tsimshian. The storage and web of water and silla skuskuism. Doaxism, Sealaska, at a Lee. Dim will get him, dim will jabba, Amahatlalsagwa. My name in our language is Nukutsusmask. It means to work with the cedar bark, was the name my grandfather gave me, it was his brother's name. Introduced myself and my son, and how proud I am to work with my son, how happy I am to stand in front of you, how grateful we are to you, to Sealaska, for having us have a part in this honored place. This house front is an example of the old way of making Tsimshian house fronts. If you look at old photographs of the village of Laholams, which is, they used to call it Port Simpson, and the other villages of the Tsimshian on the Skeena and the coastline below the Skeena near Prince Rupert, you see that the Tsimshian people, the coast Tsimshian people, were famous for their long houses, but they were all painted long houses. And very few, sometimes the boards were all painted on and only put up at potlatches and then all taken down and stored away so they would last and only put up for big occasions. And the style, my son studies the old style of longhouses, and the style of the painting comes from the 1800s. This is an original design, but it's based on the old way of making house fronts. And we are hoping that you will help us to educate people who come here as to good formline design. I know that Sealaska is really pushing, trying to increase knowledge and skill in formline design. And we hope that this can be a teaching tool, and that all of you will use your opportunities to direct people that this is a good example, and we hope it is, because we worked for 6 months trying to do the very best we could, because we knew that this would stand for generations. I'm not going to talk much longer. I just want to, my son is going to explain the story of this, of the house front, and say some other things, but I do want to say that this is a Tsimshian house front, in that it represents the 4 clans of our people. We don't have two main crests like the Tlingit and the Haida. We have 4, and all 4 are equal to us. Over here is the eagle, and the wolf, the raven, and the killer whale. In the eyes of each of the main 4 crests are the number 1 secondary crest, the raven and the frog, grizzly bear in the eye of the killer whale, the beaver in the eye of the eagle, and the black bear in the eye of the wolf. I'm going to let David talk about the middle section when he's talking about the story and the people at the top. So.
Well, like I said upstairs, this is a real dream come true. It's a book that came out in about 2001 called Transforming Image Painted Arcs of the Northwest Coast First Nations. And it has a few examples of great old Tsimshian house fronts, and have studied those, and that's where my design style comes from. So when Dad got the commission and asked me to be a part of it, he let me do the main drawing, and I'm responsible mostly for the end designs. And I'd had a different idea for the center section, and it wasn't working. And Dad came over and said, "Well, do this," and it broadened the figure and made that center figure the whole center section. The only instruction we had as far as the design was that it needed to represent the land. So this center figure, this giant figure, see hands and feet, body, head here, is a supernatural being representing the earth, our land, Tlingit Haida Tsimshian land. And the people, all the people up at the top, all the faces are different. Even though this appears symmetrical at first, if you look outside of the head and body from side to side, all the elements are different from side to side. The faces, things up here, all those little guys up there, they're all different. It's filled with little spirit faces and supernatural beings representing, everything about our territory. The center figure we really wanted to make a point of this being our contribution, so the legend that goes with this center section, how we made it make sense for representing the land, is our version of the strongman story. At the end of the story, after he's proven himself, and everyone knows that he's not this lazy guy who lies in the dirt, that he's actually this incredibly powerful man, is called to take over for his uncle, who is the man who holds up the earth. And he lays on his back with a stick on his chest and balances the earth on it. When he coughs is when we have earthquakes. And so that's this fella down here, and his hands coming up, in this case holding it this way, holding up the earth. Over here, the circular body here, there's an old Tsimshian house front that George MacDonald at one point had said, "Boy, someday you should do a new version of this house front, because all that's left of it is this body and a little bit above and a little bit below. All the rest of the boards from it are gone. No one knows, it's all that's left of it." So as a way to honor that old house front, I used that. This right here is directly taken from that old panel of that old house front, and I did an alternate version for the other side. But it was a way of honoring those old guys who did those great house fronts in the 1800s. Like Dad said, it was really important that if you were to take a black and white photo of this and put it next to a black and white photo of an old Tsimshian house front, that they would complement each other, that they would look like they came from the same school of design, and from its complexity to its balance and its sheer size. I mean, since we've had it up, this is the first time we've seen the entire thing, and I'm glad it all fits. And it truly is an honor to be a part of the building and everything that's going to be happening here. But personally, in a Tsimshian-centric way, it's such an honor to have added to that legacy of our people making house fronts. And I hope it won't be the last, but if it is, at least I had the chance to do one, and to do it with him. So that's the overall. I'll say make sure that we send the full story for the. His name was Amala, the man who holds up the earth. And again, I guess the last thing, and I'll repeat, with the 4 clans being. There's still a lot of Haida and Tlingit people that don't understand. Like, they'll see me and I say, "Oh, I'm a wolf," and they say, "Oh, so you're an eagle," because that's the way it is up here. And I said, "No, it's a completely separate thing." So that's really important when people come in. There was a guy who came in earlier just with Brian, and he said, "Oh, I thought the killer whale was with the eagles," and we had to explain, no, it's different for us. So if that ever comes up, please let people know that we're complicated that way. And again, thank you guys. I hope you enjoy getting to see this every day. I'm certainly going to miss it when I'm not around. But I hope this, I'm sure this won't be the last time we get to come and help here and do things, whether it's teaching or making more art for someplace else or something. So, thank you.
We have just two little things to add to the name after.
Oh, okay.
Because, this is just kind of a humorous thing, I hope. Because we have 4 clans, young people from our culture have a bigger selection of potential mates, because we can, if him being a wolf, he can choose an eagle or a raven or a killer whale instead of just having a raven and an eagle, having to choose one or the other. So that's kind of fun. And the other thing is that we intend to, at the opening, give this its official name in our language.
The design,
not the building, just the name of this, because that's our tradition. Is the house fronts had a name just like a person. And Amala is the name of the guy who holds up the world, but the name is going to be Amala, but there's also going to be a name underneath it.
Wil Mangaa da Ha'lidzogat.
Yeah, it's a long name, but Wil Mangaa da Ha'lidzogat, he who holds up the world. So, yeah, it's like a movie title with a subtitle. Thank you, Rosita. Thank you very much. Thanks for caring about me and my son and our culture. I know that I can say this. I learned this from Albert. Other people can say really nice things about us that we can't say about ourselves. So I'm going to say this is a great legacy for all of your efforts too. And I appreciate everything you've done to bring this to fruition. And all of you young people who are going to carry the flag for the next 50 years, hopefully, more power to you, and we're proud to be with you. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Do you have any questions? Yes?
I wonder if you would go a little bit more into detail on the Formline and why you're placing things the way you're placing it and how you're getting the balance into your design.
Well, that's good. You got a week.
Exactly.
All right, well, this is the first part that was drawn.
Can I say something about salmon trout while you're thinking about your answer?
Okay.
Salmon trout, the salmon design, right here. This is one of many. This is called the salmon trout. Okay. This is a design that you'll see all over this, both sides of the end panels, and it's the basis for all profile faces from our culture, from our art. Tlingit, Haida, Simpson. We all use the same set of rules. You see this, I'm gonna go to the bigger thing in a minute, but you see the ovoid, U-form, and the jaw, so it's a head, the snout, and a mouth looks like a salmon's head. That's why they call it a salmon trout design. Now look at this design. Watch, we'll follow my finger here, look. Okay, now look here. That's the same thing as this. It's the same thing there. There are two of these minus the snout in the eye, facing each other. And this big one, here's his lower jaw, split in the middle without the snout, just the eye and the jaw and the cheek. That big, huge thing is the same thing as this. It's the same thing as this, and this, and this, that. This, the wolf. There's a salmon trout, salmon design, the Formline profile. It's the basis for so many things up here. Even this little guy right here. Variations.
to, now I don't have an answer yet. Formline is a very understood. It's not a well understood art form even by our own people. If the northwest coast, the northern northwest coast, because once you go south of the Tsimshian, Formline stops being used with such strict rules as we use it. Once you get to the Kwak Wak Wak and Coast Salish, it's something else down there. But our system of Formline, which is universal, even though there are different stylistic regions, it's all the same rules. It's just how the artists from the different areas drew them. If the Northwest Coast could peg down one thing that I think is our grandest creation, it's this system of two-dimensional design. Like I said, it's misunderstood, misrepresented a lot. I think it comes down to people think it's a lot simpler than it actually is. It's a very, very complex system that the more you learn of it, the more complex it becomes. You have to be conscious of the negative space you create when you draw the positive space. And a great example on here is the killer whale's tail. The pectoral fin comes up. The killer whale's tail creates a negative space U form. And I was able to put the curled back of the dorsal fin into that space. And even little areas like this that originally didn't have any red lines here, it was just this open space. Still, when the foot, the claw is drawn and the angle of the wing creates this modified U-form space. And though it's things like that that separate what you call right from wrong. It's odd to have a form of art that can be right and wrong, which causes anybody who really enjoys it, that's the challenge, is how do you have free expression in a system that has rules and boundaries? You know, it governs line thickness, color balance, and what you think of, like this little space here, this negative space, is like a U-form space, but it's negative space. This section here, how these lines had to be drawn in order for this negative space to complement the style of design that we're using. You could almost fit an ovoid right there. Those things are really important, and it takes a step beyond, you know, like we're looking at what the beginners are going to get in these books, and it's just an ovoid and a U-form, and, you know, and a lot of people will stop there, and they don't go beyond and study, but if you look at, like, some of the old boxes you guys have downstairs are just masterpieces of Formline. So I hope, like he said, I hope this thing ends up being a teaching tool. And if someone were to study this, but they want to do, if they're Tlingit, they want to do Tlingit style Formline, the rules are the same. And that's because it was a traded art form. Most bentwood boxes have very similar designs on them, so that when the Haidas came over with some canoes to trade and they had boxes filled up, any chief on the coast could trade for one of those boxes because there was this general beautiful Formline design on it. And we all traded back and forth, and the design system is the same. I was teaching here in 2005 or 6, and they asked if I was teaching Tlingit design. And I said, no, I'm teaching Formline. Because once you learn the rules, it's up to you to make it Tlingit style. And Tlingit style, what people say is Tlingit style, because it changes as you go south. But it's a bolder Formline with much less negative space. That's really the main difference. Otherwise, it's Formline. And that's why, like Chief Shakes could have a Tsimshian do a screen inside his house, because all of us could recognize the same things in it because we all used it. Which is a neat way to recognize the fact that there was an incredible trade relationship and commerce up and down the coast. And this is a way of continuing that and reminding everybody that we are the people that, you know, they talk about the old people believing that, you know, in reincarnation, that we are the old people, and it's 2015 and we're just continuing on these old things. Pretty great. Anything else?
Yeah, I said one little quick addition to what he was saying. When you say Tlingit style art or Haida style art or Tsimshian style art, most of that comes from the fact that there were strong artists in every generation who set the tribal style. Somebody that was really, really good, you know, like Charles Edenshaw among the Haidas, you know, Nathan Jackson among the Tlingit people, you know, Dempsey Bob and the Beasley brothers from here, and they have a style. And that becomes a tribal style if it's strong enough. It's the same way with the Tsimshian and the other, you know, the other tribes up and down the coast. They all have somebody that basically set the style. And the other thing about what he was saying about what is known as Tlingit style is really the earliest form of Northwest Coast art that everybody had at one time. All the people had this bolder form line with not a lot of negative space. Negative meaning where the wood shows. Okay? But that was because, one of the reasons was because the tools weren't there to create a lot of, and we didn't do a lot of really, really big things. A lot of them were small, so that the form lines were wider because they didn't have the tools to take away so much of the wood as we do now. And so it built over generations, and up in this area, it was retained longer, and it became what we think of as Tlingit art, being that thicker, bolder form line with less background. And then as you go down the coast, down to the Tsimshian, Bella Kula, you know, down to that area, and with the Haidas, then there was more of a thinner form line and more open space, and it just developed over years. And it was some guy decided, well, I'm going to make more space on my designs. Look what Robert Davidson does now. They call his art Haida art. Well, he's the best of the Haidas, but it's Robert Davidson's style of Haida art. It's you know, and he can do this just as easily as he can do the things that he does. You know, he's really good at this. So the last thing I wanted to show you was, before we stop, is these guys here. These are called stylized faces. They represent humans, they represent spirits, they represent a lot of different things that flew through the ancient world. And they're made differently. These are formline faces, and these are called stylized faces. And you can tell the stylized faces don't always, but a lot of times they'll have up there eyebrows and lips and teeth and things like that. And they're separate, they're kind of float inside. You see the eyebrows. These guys don't have eyebrows, but it's just this is just a variation.
One very sad effect of contact and everything we've gone through is, for the most part, I don't think I've ever heard a traditional word in any of the languages for any of these design elements. Because potlatching and our ceremonies were pretty much the first things to go, the old masters weren't able to pass on the style. That's why you look at work from the early 1900s and it really drops off in quality, but it's because those guys weren't able to continue to teach. And as a result of that, the word stopped being used. Ovoid is a word Bill Holm came up with in the 1950s. So I think one of the next things for all of us who are working on our languages to do is maybe come up with new words for all these shapes again, so we can stop saying ovoid and salmon trout and all these things and use our own words again. This is really important. And this, you see this a lot, and it's, like I said, can't say that things are wrong, because the point I'm going to make, and then I'll point out where there's an exception. But, okay, these two U elements here. they come out and they come to a fine line width from the primary form line. Black is the primary form line because it's the boldest one. If you reduce the size of these secondary U-forms, like here, where they're pulled back away from the form line, you have to contain it with a fine line. You have to. It's one of the rules. And you can't have an ovoid that floats. It's the same idea here, where this contains this element. Floating ovoids like this have to have fine lines around them, and they hold them in place. If there isn't one, in my mind, it's not done. And you see that a lot. See, all over the place, people make art and they don't put fine lines around ovoids. It drives me nuts. And you see, and well, no, they don't understand. Like this tongue space, this design technically could have filled up this entire mouth, but because it's pulled away from the main form line, you have to contain it with a fine line. Same here. This fine line element closes off and contains this body design because it's pulled away from the main form line. Now there's areas where there's slight exceptions, like this floating fine line is technically contained by this fine line, and that's okay. Form line is the rules are the kind where you say, well, you can't do that, except, and there'll be some example where some old master had done it, and you're like, well, if they did it, then it's okay. What was another one? You see it in the frog's tongue. It's away from the main form line, so there's a fine line over it. And the big one, any floating ovoid, whether it's relieved like this or small like this, has to have a fine line around it. This element, salmon trout design, whether it's a profile one or where the two are put together, the reason for this is you can't have anything on a design that's larger than the main top of the main ovoid. The main head ovoid. On this one, it's that huge one on this main figure. So, if this were to be filled in black, it would be too heavy for the rest of the design, and you have to break it up somehow. You can do it simply with a relief like this, so it lightens it up, or you can be complex and do something like a salmon trout design. Those things, you can't have anything thicker than the main ovoid of the main figure. And that's also something I see a lot of people do, where they'll have some big heavy floating thing, and it just throws the whole thing off. Form line is about balance and flow and movement. Robert talks about it, movement of energy, and how different shapes, different reliefs come down and direct the energy in different directions. So I could talk about this all day, but those are the important ones. These work because they're contained with this element right above it, with just that fine line width away from it. That's another one of those exceptions. And you can't, again, put an asterisk by that, have elements that just float. Like this little red combination of ovoid and U-forms attaches to the main form line. It's rare, except for maybe certain designs in bodies, but things have to come and attach. Like on a killer whale, if these are they're very tricky, but they're just the ribs. The red elements are the ribs of the killer whale. If these weren't attached somewhere, that's not right. You can't just float an element arbitrarily. It has to make sense and attach somewhere within the design. Those are things that you guys, on some basic level, working here, should know. It'll help when it comes time to pick celebration t-shirt designs, things like that. By the way, I would really like to do next year's t-shirt design. Whoever is in charge of that.
Oh, you're donating?
I'll do it. I'll do it for free. Let me know. Really. I'll do it. You all heard me.
You got it.
I'd love to do it. So anyway, okay, I'm done.
Got it on
You're really not done. We could be talking about it. 'Cause I've been thinking about things as he's talking, but I'm going to give you a rest.
Now, what were you thinking about? Tell me.
What was I thinking about? Okay, real quick.
Yeah.
What he said about floating, the only things that float are these shoulder designs or these inner ovoids that are connected with, or that are surrounded by these fine lines. That's everything else touches, red and black, it all touches. If you see something floating beside one of these, then it's wrong. It's just plain old wrong.
Except for that.
Yeah, yes.
That's okay. But it says it's contained within that.
But it's inside the fine lines.
And it's okay for like the eyebrows just to be barely touching in the corner?
Yeah, or
See, that's a whole different thing. That's a stylized face. That's different than the regular Formline system.
But and sometimes you'll see them on old pieces where they don't have fine lines around them and they are floating right there, but it's because, and they call them stylized for that reason, it sort of breaks what you'd call the rules, but because they're on old ones.
And there's an infinite number of ways to display stylized faces. And you see all of those 7 faces across the top are different. All of the what we call the mask, this is called a mask across the eyes. Every one of them is different. Dashing and cross-hatching are extra colors. They're there to keep it from being a big open space, and they form another color without having to use another color. It lightens up a heavy area. Now, the last thing I'm going to say, I hope it's the last thing, is something Rosita said, and I was thinking about it earlier. So many of our own people, from my village, from Seattle, from here, they'll look at a piece of art that's really not very good. And they'll say, oh, this is so beautiful. And I just want to yell out, no, it's not. It's not. Not because I have this big ego and I think I'm the greatest. I don't. We don't think we're the greatest. You know, we work very hard. But it's a matter of educating our people to know the difference between and raising the bar, like you all want to do, raising the bar, by challenging people to look at the old stuff and take natural ability and increase the output, the quality of output. Just because you walk around town here, Sitka, Ketchikan, all up and down the coast, and look in some of these shops. You know, it's not that beautiful.
If our people, all of our people, could only go to all the museums that have thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of our people's art, maybe there should be some kind of scholarship program where people can go travel to some of these places. Not even ones who are artists, just our own people, so they could understand the level of quality that the old people achieved.
And every tribe, Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, had just unreal masters, unreal beauty. There are a few pieces downstairs I got a chance to see today, just blew me away. You have a small collection that I'm sure will get bigger and bigger as time goes by, but there are some just beautiful old Tlingit pieces down there with the Formline and the quality of the carving. Just amazing. I don't know if you've seen those, but I got lucky and got a chance to look at those.
The other aspect of it is that it's not just art. Like, that's not a word we had. It's important that our people understand the purpose of it. It was never meant to just hang on the wall and be pretty. So, in our Western, especially those of us whose English is our first language, you hear art and there's this whole thing where you can do free expression and you can just do whatever you want because it's art. And that's not really the way our art works. There's got to be the reason behind it, but also, especially with Formline, there are rules. There is right and wrong. And I know that you guys, SHI, is making a push to assert that. And I think it's okay. I think in the old days, you had to prove, you also not only had to maybe be in line to be a carver or a weaver, but you had to prove yourself and you had to train, and it was not just anybody gets to go do this and send it on out. There was a status. There was a status, but also a hierarchy and level within the people who were artists that said this is how it is. And I think we should push to get back to that. I don't think there's anything wrong with us giving Formline and our carving and our weaving and all, giving that a bar that we shouldn't accept going below.